we have a guest today who is related to another thing I've talked about for the past almost month now. That, of course, being Mass Effect Andromeda, the newest BioWare entry in the Mass Effect series. And today I have one of the two stars of that game, one of the new leads. I have Fryda Wolf, the voice of Sarah Ryder, among many other things that we're going to be discussing. So welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So I'm just going to start right off the bat with this because, we had the honor of, that's 5 years ago now, wow, of Jennifer Hale was on the show right when Mass Effect 3 launched, and she was, talking about how she loved being a ginger, and, she was one of the faces, probably the best-known face of the previous franchise, and when Andromeda launched, at least in the first trailer, she was the voice that basically kind of passed the torch on to you. How did you feel when, you realized that the weight of a franchise kind of gets passed on to you after all these years and fan expectations and, well, just lots?
It's bonkers and gnarly. I'm only 4 years into my full-time VO career, and I certainly didn't expect. First of all, like when you get into any kind of creative media industry, don't have any expectations because we're commercial artists in a contractor position. It's not up to us who we work for and when we work. It's just if there's work. And then if you actually get a part, it's if you're lucky enough to win the lottery to have been chosen for that part. So you don't really get to decide your career. You can say no, but early on, especially when people don't really know your name, haven't really worked with you, people don't know what you're good for. It behooves you to say yes to everything and audition for everything that comes your way. So I certainly did not expect to have any major franchises, especially not a protagonist role early on. But this whole time I've been comparing this Mass Effect experience. For me, it's exactly like Force Awakens versus Star Wars. Star Wars is a very special thing that is never going away. Those characters will live on forever in everyone's memories, and those actors will always hold a special place. None of that is being erased. But as long as the franchise keeps pumping out money, people are going to keep making media for it. So with Force Awakens, Daisy Ridley is only like 24 years old. And she made Force Awakens probably 3 years ago. She's probably like 20, 21 at the time of production starting, maybe. So it's the same deal where, she has to inherit the weight of coming up after Carrie Fisher. But my immediate perspective was like, well, look, I have the added bonus of I'm not Jennifer Hale and I'm never going to be Jennifer Hale. So I do not have to live up to being Jennifer Hale because that is a ridiculous impossibility. It is physically, emotionally, performance impossible for me to be somebody else. I can only be myself and do my best. And I'm sure Daisy really felt the same thing. And then the other added bonus, exactly the same as Force Awakens versus Star Wars, I have the benefit of not playing the same character. So I don't have to present the world with my rendition of Commander Shepard. I get to be somebody new from scratch, Sarah Ryder. And same with Daisy Ridley. She didn't have to be Princess Leia 2.0. She got to be Rey from scratch. And then the responsibility we inherit is that there's, fan expectation who are used to a certain whatever, and now we have to come play in that universe. So it feels very analogous to me.
One thing I really love about Andromeda is it's not the same game. In fact, I'll say the greatest advantage I have with this game that I love so much is it's a game that has time to breathe. You aren't pressured. You don't have to be like, the world's going to die now, move. You can breathe, you can explore, it's space. You can do all these wondrous things, and it's a longer game. You get to do more. I want to go over here, I want to go over there, and that's a really good feeling to have a game where you can breathe. It's fun, it's relaxing, and it's honestly, I'm a grad student with 2 kids, 3 and under. Inquisition took me like a year to finish.
Wow.
This game took me 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's 77 hours, I think, my first playthrough. So I literally couldn't put it down. I played it every time I could, and I have tons of schoolwork to do, and I still found time. I had to play it. So that's a major win for this game.
Hats off to you. Personally, I prefer games also like where you feel like you can get in, get out, and feel like you've accomplished something, even if it's not, completion or achievements or whatever, but whatever time you put in, whether it's an hour or 2, you just feel like, okay, I got a chunk done.
Exactly. And, you mentioned how your voiceover career is only like 4 years old, but in those 4 years you've been in a Final Fantasy game. You've been in a Sid Meier's Civilization game. You've been in James Bond. You've been in a DC game series. You've been in a Lego game. You've been in Fallout. You've been in Street Fighter, XCOM, Justice League Action, Conan, and Mass Effect. So like you have a lot of big franchises already under your belt, be it smaller parts or bigger parts, but you have experience in well-known franchises already that look really great on your resume to say.
I'm super lucky, and to that effect, carrying a franchise is not a small deal. Like, for example, getting to do I've worked for DC a couple times, but they're both listed now. So once is Poison Ivy for DC Super Friends, and then in the new Justice League Action I get to be Fiora. People like me for villains, and I'm not complaining. That for DC, Warner Brothers Animation, for example, you have to go through a vetted process because you're playing a franchise character. Like, there's literally a board of people that approve you for casting or don't. So, which once I found that, I was like, oh my God. Okay, well then I better not screw this up. And then I'm to date, I'm the only female narrator for nearly 30 years of the Civilization franchise.
Yeah, that's really impressive, especially since, that's a franchise that, has the narrators, has all these voices, and you did a really good job.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't forget. I like anybody who thinks I show up to the studio with a Mai Tai in one hand and a joint in the other, and I show up in, board shorts or something. Yeah, I do. No, I don't. I don't. I mean, I spent 12 years in game development before I became a voice actor. So because I came from production, I know a few people who came from production in VO, including Eric Bauza was character layout artist for animation. Matt Mercer was a assistant producer for God of War. Those of us who came from production don't forget what it's like, and don't forget how the sausage is made. And we have, I think, a lot more respect for this has got to get done. Especially with VO, I mean, it's not like if we don't get it today, we can pick this up tomorrow when I feel like it, when I'm in the mood. A studio's booked out for a finite amount of time, so you have to show up ready and willing and wanting to work. And the end goal of everybody there is that by the time we leave, everybody feels good and they got what they wanted. Because if they don't, somebody's in trouble. This is going to cost more money. If I come with an attitude, I'm not going to work again in a hurry. So I just, like this morning, I went out to brunch with a friend of mine who works in practical effects. His name is Neil Wynn, and he works with Guillermo del Toro. And I like his, one of the coolest things he's done is he's responsible for the look and application of the Ape Sapien suit for the Hellboy film series and stuff like that. And we're just talking about every time somebody who wants to break into these creative industries and well, what are some tips? What do you recommend? And we're always just be cool to work with. It's amazing how such a little, seemingly little effort as just be cool to work with and be mindful of the fact that everyone is there. Everyone is there to help each other and get it done. And magically more work follows. So, I mean, that's certainly at least worked for me. So yeah, obviously I'm very grateful, but I know part of it is it has to be because I show up, just being mindful of the fact that everyone wants to do a good job. It's not about me. It's about the entire production team trying to get this thing out the door, whether it's a game or an animation or whatever. I'm contributing a tiny, tiny piece of it just that day for those 1 to 4 hours in the booth.
And so your experience, having worked on games beforehand, is that just how small yet important your role is, and you're making sure you're making their job as easy as possible by doing your task on time and making sure you're ready to go.
Yeah, the snowball effect of one person not pulling their weight is major, and people have really long memories in creative industries if you make their life or their job difficult. So it just behooves you to it's not about you. It's never about you. I don't know. I think I picked that up I did improv with Upright Citizens Brigade, which was really, every time someone asked me, what do you recommend? What do I do to prepare for voice acting? Everyone always says you have to be an actor. I agree with that, but I think improv is the most useful kind of acting to indulge in because it forces you to listen to your gut, have natural reactions, think on your feet. But the number one thing that they teach you in improv is that when you're up there with a group, your job is to make everyone else look good. If if your only prerogatives to make yourself look good, the whole thing falls apart. And that's absolutely true in any other kind of team production job you embark on. If you're only there to make yourself look better, to impress others, and your whole work ethic is a pissing contest, you were going to lose long term.
And that's something I've heard from. I know 3 BioWare actors off the top of my head that talk about that all the time, like Belinda Cornish, Gideon Emery, and Mark Meir. They all talk about their improv and how that's helped them so much be who they are and be able to do their job better, because it stretches them in some ways, and they get to work collaboratively with others. And I know they do like festivals and so on as well, I believe. Like,
yeah, Gideon's lovely. Gideon Emery and I have the same agency. I've read with him a few times for auditions. Gideon's ridiculous. Gideon from South Africa. He's South African, and he still has that accent in his, day to day, but he can put on pretty much any accent. He sings jazz. He's put out albums, and he's humble as hell. I read with him like in the first year of my career, and he treated me like an equal, which for me in my little, preemie first year eyeballs as big as saucers was just like, how? but him treating me like an equal and giving me the time of day also helps me obviously do my job better, where it's like, okay, I can do this. I can rise to the challenge and to the moment and get this done with you. I can meet you halfway. Thanks for helping me. Even if it's like little silent emotional signals, they are there. Versus like if he came in, with the attitude of like, who is this newbie I've never heard of? You're nobody. Can we just get this done because I have other places to be? I'm Gideon Emery. Do you know who I am? He's not like that at all. And because of that, he works a lot too, I'm convinced.
So one more question about Poison Ivy before I forget about it. You stepped into this role that has been played by Tara Strong, Jennifer Hale, Tasia Valenja, Courtney Taylor, tons and tons of voice actors.
Which one, Poison Ivy?
Have dipped into, a Poison Ivy role. I think the most famous is probably Diane Pershing. I think she did it longest with the DC stuff. But like, what sort of pressure did you feel stepping into a character that's A, well-known, and B, has been done by so many other people in so many different interpretations? Did it add more pressure for you, or was there less because there's so many others that have tried it?
Yeah, there's less. So what they do, and I think what any group does when you take an existing, already been there, done that franchise, and you do it over again, there's no need to do what's been done before. What's the point? And there's always going to be like a fresh new casting director involved, and a fresh new booth director involved, fresh new animators, fresh new directors. So they want the same but different. And the best way I can analogize that is like, if a steak tasted the same everywhere you went, then kind of what's the point of eating steak? And I know that's like, you want a great steak, but what makes a great steak? Well, this particular chef does it this way, this particular chef does it that way. And you go to certain places to get a certain flavor. You go to certain actors to get a certain flavor. So, for example, when I got to do Poison Ivy, that was that particular round of production staff. Again, it comes back down to the production staff. So they liked what I did with my audition, and they let me run with it. It just like with anything, when you get hired, it's because something about your audition sounded good enough to do the part, but once they get you in the booth or they bring you back for a callback, they want to see how flexible you are. And a lot of the time you're kind of asked to make adjustments on the day when you're there. So you can't be rigid and married to what you audition with, because that might not be what they want. That's just like a jumping off point, for example. So with Poison Ivy, they liked what I did and just kind of let me run with it and steered me, but they were never like, can you do more like what Tara did? And I know also, like, if that was ever uttered in a session, I would just be like, why don't you just hire Tara? Like, she'll be here in a heartbeat, So no, I've been really lucky both with like, I don't think Feor has been done before outside of like a Superman 2 live action. Same thing. They just let me do what I felt was right, and then would steer me with context. And frankly, across the board, those are the best sessions for me as far as how they feel and how I feel afterwards. And I think sometimes those are the best performances. Like, people have asked me about Mass Effect, how much of the character was established before you got there. Well, I showed up for my first, and I've mentioned this story, my first day of recording. Like, we don't, for video games, everything is codenamed. Yeah. We're just given a date and a time. We don't get a script, and we're just like, just show up at this studio at this time. for this codename project and you don't know what you're doing. So I showed up and there's nobody there. The engineers are people that I know for many years, and the client's Skyping in, and it's Caroline Livingstone over in Edmonton. She's like, "Hi, Fryda, so nice to meet you. Well, welcome to Mass Effect. You're the hero character. You're the player character. Hey, let's go. Here's the first line." I was like, "What?" I didn't have literally 2 seconds to react. It was just like Caroline's like, "Hi, here, you're doing this," and we're going. So she basically shot the starter gun, and I had to take off running. And so immediately it was like, all right, this is not your time to have your little beauty pageant moment where you have a meltdown and you thank everyone and you drop your flowers and faint. It was like, again, cool. We got 2 hours to do this. Let's go. And I just immediately started making decisions. And the only time I was steered by any of the Mass Effect directors that handled me was contextually of, I don't fully understand maybe what's going on in the story or my previous history with this character because we haven't done that script yet, or maybe I missed that we're yelling across a ravine. But as far as like what I felt was right because it's what I'm feeling. That makes sense. Versus directors who don't know what they're doing. I mean, also I'll say like Caroline herself is an actor. Josh Dean is a working actor. Shannon, who's another one of the directors, she's a working actor in the theater circuit up there too. Like they know what they're asking me to do, and they wouldn't put me through something they themselves wouldn't be willing to put themselves through. Most of my favorite directors are working actors as well, like Stephanie Shea and Liam O'Brien. So the bad worst directors are the ones who instead of making sure you understand the story, tell you how to feel. And that's a huge mistake, because if I tell you, I mean, something as benign as like, oh, you went to McDonald's and you were really looking forward to getting it and they ran out of French fries. I need you to react however you're going to react, and we'll go from there. If I tell you, start with like, be really angry, you're going to like put on this fake pretend anger that's going to stink of fake and weird and hammy, unless that's the direction. So to answer that question, no, like, I'm lucky enough that I'm working like with really high class franchises that hire high class directors as well, right? Like it would be a weird dark day if I walk into a DC Warner Brothers session and it's some crap director who doesn't know what they're doing and abuses people. They wouldn't work for very long.
Yeah. You can't have, an Andrea Romano and then you have, follow up with someone who no one wants to touch again.
You know what? I just started working with Andrea Romano on an animated series, my first time, and she's like immediately I'm like, oh, that's why you have awards. Okay.
That's why Mike talks about you.
Yeah. It's the same thing where she drives context. It's the same thing. Like she's also, because that's an animated show, she's communicating with the writers directly behind her, right? And she becomes the actor whisperer, where they're like, oh no, like this part of the line is good news. This part of the line is bad news. And if I didn't understand that, of course I'm, performing it incorrectly. And just going from there versus like louder, softer, angry, happy, like that stuff just doesn't work.
So you mentioned, I know this especially with BioWare games, but they don't give you the script until you show up. Are there any video games or anything or animated shows where they give you the script even a day early so you can at least look through it so you're ready? Or is it pretty much standard, you show up, here's your script, read it, go?
Games are extremely singular in that regard. Animation, 100% of the time you get the script before. Whether it's the night before or several nights before, you always get a script before. And you're expected to read it and have thoughts and opinions about what's going on and show up with as full an understanding as you can manage. Games, 1% of the time if I'm lucky. And like the few times I've gotten a script in advance, it's always like really benign stuff like call-outs or something where it's like, well, this isn't really story stuff because I'm, grenade! That's not really useful.
Because it seems like a game like, say, Final Fantasy, where you're essentially dubbing it, where you have to dub it to their voice, to their movements, you might get something early or at least prepare for that, but I'm
nope.
That one, though.
Nope. And for Final Fantasy, for me, I didn't do ADR for that. So there was no syncing to picture. That was just, they already had, translated scripts and know what they wanted, and they didn't care about timing. I just got to do it the normal way. So, I mean, with that in mind, my performance and everyone's performance for Mass Effect Andromeda, from me to Natalie Dormer, probably, those are all cold reads. Wow. 100% cold reads.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so one question I have about, Andromeda, the process is, BioWare is really famous for doing branching dialogue where, of course, you can respond this way if the character wants to, or this way, and you have to have different emotions. how easy was it for you to adjust to that style of dialogue where you have to be able to change your emotional response, based on the line as they go? I don't know how they have you recorded. They record you all the answers at the same time, but it seems like that would be a more challenging way to do it rather than reading a story straight through.
Well, a few months in, it becomes routine, right? Just like with like every job you do by the third week, the second date, whatever. It's just like, okay, this is how we do it. So we would perform each scene, like start from the top and go down again, this particular branch, and then that, the logical branch, the casual branch or whatever. More than anything, I actually found myself, which I've never really done before, adjusting my physicality in a big way. For all the casual reads, I would instantly slouch. I'd punch my my thumbs through my belt loops on my jeans and just like, kind of stand with my crotch hanging out and just be like, what are you going to do? And that would relax my read. Right. And I've seen this in classes too, when I was coming up and doing stuff like I did, I took classes with Richard Horvitz. So he's the voice of Invader Zim, and
he's coming back in the summer.
Yeah. In a new film. He's Chaos and Skylanders. He's been around a long time, and he also teaches in his classes. Out of anybody's in town for games and animation, I recommend him the best. Again, like another working actor who knows what the hell he's asking us to do, and I think he does. That one I think is worth the money. I remember we were in one of his classes, and there was a guy who's just sort of like naturally like really sweet and shy and demure, and his read had to be kind of like very broadcastery and whatever, and he just could do it. And Richard's like, just be Superman. So I watched the guy just sort of like split his legs open into a power stance, puff his chest out, and put his hands on his hips like freaking Superman. With like, you could almost see the cape billowing behind him, and his read completely changed. So long as you respect the microphone, because we need to hear you. So don't go crazy don't make noise, rustling fabric, don't wear jewelry, like dumb, obvious stuff. So long as your mouth stays in the general area of where it needs to be in front of the mic, adjusting your physicality makes all the difference. It's like everybody I know, when we're doing pain emotes, everybody clenches the crap out of their core. Everybody just like, you could almost see like an invisible punch happening. And it makes a huge difference. Again, just stay on mic and don't like flail your arms and knock stuff over. But that's how I got through doing all the 4 different reads. So like for logical, I would be really, my back would be really straight and rigid. And for casual, like I said, I'd be basically swinging my dick around. And then for, what do we have? What are the other ones? Like emotional?
Like the game is full of flirting. There's so much.
Flirting. That's another one. So like, this is extremely common in VO. When we're told, can you make that warmer? Can you warm that up? Force a smile. Like you can tell when people are showing their teeth, right? Versus front. Like you can hear it. So all those little adjustments would completely change my read. Especially if like, you close your eyes and you're not looking at me, you can hear it.
I know I've heard from mostly female voice actresses that they talk about, like in games like a Mass Effect or like Call of Duty, we have to do lots of grunts and groans. They have a especially challenging time not making it sound like porn noises.
Like what noises?
Like porn noises. Like blended porn noises. They say, when you have all the grunts, groans, and the action noises, it's really hard sometimes not to make it sound like porn. Which to me sounds kind of funny, but
it's only porn if you make it porn. And by that I mean like it always has to be sincere. Like any kind of acting, and especially voice acting, is super exhausting because I describe it as like, look, I have to have real fights with fake people. And in the same way where when you have a real argument, like a real raised voices argument with somebody, how afterwards you're just like, just don't talk to me. You want to go fetal and curl in a corner and just like, don't talk to me, don't look at me, don't touch me. I'm like that, but with people that weren't actually there in a situation I wasn't actually in. But it has to be real for me. So if you're not really feeling it and you start getting lazy with those emotes, it might easily turn into, is that what you like? Look, if you generally make that sound when someone slaps you, you're not in pain, buddy. Right?
You need better noise.
Yeah, you might be into it. So long as you keep it sincere, it won't sound funny. Having said that, like you do a full day of those with actors or whatever, you start losing your mind and then everything's funny.
So, I know when most people are brought in for every sessions, they can be used. It's a 4-hour session. It can be used. They can use them for up to 3 different characters. Did you get to voice any of the small races or anyone around the Nexus or so on as well in Andromeda, or are you just
not even joking? Not even joking. No time.
Okay.
No time at all. I asked, and I'm not allowed to say how many hours and how many sessions, because I do keep a business ledger, so I can tell you exactly down how many hours and how many days. It was significant.
Wow.
It was significant over a year and a half. And not like 5 days a week, because, I have other jobs, they have other actors get through whatever, but no, not for a second. Did I do anybody else? Nope.
So you got to stay in the zone the entire time for one character. It's not like, I know there's some shows where people have like 3 voices in the same show and they're reading it right, and they have to switch back and forth and talk to themselves. I imagine that would just be.
Mm-hmm.
Have you actually had an experience where you get to have conversations with yourself in the same show or game?
I'm in a show right now that's not announced yet, but I'm in I'll say, I'm in DreamWorks. I'm in a couple of DreamWorks shows. DreamWorks has this long-term relationship with Netflix now, where all their properties, and even some properties that aren't films, like Voltron, for example, are being paid for by Netflix but produced by DreamWorks. And they're amazing to work for. And I'm in one of their shows where I'm 2 characters that are always together and do talk to each other. And I've had to go back and forth. And they're like, if you want, we'll just, we'll do it one time. I'm like, nah, it's because it's easier also just like for the melodic flow of answering myself. I've also had to do that in a video game recently, but not as 2 different characters. It was one of those things where I'm a playable character, and there's a possibility that this playable character might be in either position in the scenario. So the director actually had me talk to myself again to get as naturalistic a flow, a rhythm, and melody as possible. It sounds bonkers at first, and you think it's impossible, and then just like with anything, you're like, whatever, you just get it, and you just get it done. It just, again, like, I don't know. I always, even when I'm a little bit intimidated by something, the thing that's always buzzing in the back of my head is like, dude, this has to get done today, now. We don't have time for you to feel like you're in the mood for it. Just get it done. And like that really makes me ante up, I think. Like, what option do I have? It's this, or prove to these people who have taken the time to listen to my audition, to cast me, to bring me in, and to sign a contract saying they'll pay for whatever they get today. I can't spit in the face of all that. Or I can expect them to never call me again.
So here's a listener question about a game of yours I believe released a week or so ago called Paradigm.
Yeah!
And they want to know, so I know you were in Mass Effect Andromeda and other games, but Paradigm apparently just released, and I see it on your resume, and all I see is a picture of a sloth with a Donald Trump haircut. What is this game?
I'm so proud of this game. So, like, as a lot of people know by now, both Tom and I worked together. Well, not worked together, but we were both in Octodad, which was a tiny indie game, which was made by, originally, it was the final exam for a bunch of college students, and then 9 of the 12 original students that made it incorporated boys became men, and I don't mean to genderize it, but they all just happen to be dudes, and just got their shit together and put out Octodad as a sincere effort and did well, and now they're working on their next game. And because I came from production and game design, I have a bleeding heart for game developers, especially this generation of younger game developers who they have access to tools that when I was young couldn't dream of. Back in my day, in late 90s to early 2000s, if you wanted access to game tools, you had to be lucky. Like, everybody learned on the ground, trial by fire, after they get on the game company, because all licenses cost tens of thousands of dollars. And now you've got Unity and Unreal, which are free, or you can get subscriptions for Photoshop, or you can buy ready-made assets on the Unity store. Like, there's whole communities and cottage industries devoted to making assets to help people make games if they want it. And as a result, I just think like the real cream of the crop rises to the top, or whatever the metaphors are, where the people with the wherewithal, the ingenuity, and most importantly for this subset, don't have the scar tissue PTSD of having worked for someone else in a AAA environment. And I don't mean to be dismissive of that, because that's certainly my upbringing. The majority of my game career was in AAA. publishers. But when you work in the commercial space when you're young, you very quickly learn that you're hired for your expertise, not for your opinions. You are told what you can and can't make, what you can and can't do, what will and won't sell. And long term, that can have some pretty devastating effects in terms of you feeling like you have a big fence on what you're permitted to do and what's going to work, even in your own personal art. A lot of artists will just like try to go crazy in their own personal art because they feel so confined when they're working in a commercial space. So for this younger generation, like Jacob Generica out of Australia, who made Paradigm, he's never worked for anybody else. The Octodad kids from Young Horses, they never worked for anybody else. So nobody told them, hey, this game you want to make, this would never sell. This is a dumb idea. This isn't Halo. Like, they've never even had to hear that, which is so beautiful to me. They're like little precious fetuses that I'm seeing succeed, and I'm so excited for them. So with Paradigm, what happened was everything Jacob Generica does goes viral. I don't understand it. This guy wasn't even born at the height of 8-bit, 16-bit games and pixel art and all that stuff, but he's completely embraced that genre. He wasn't around for LucasArts games, but he's completely familiar with them, and King's Quest series and all these point-and-click adventure games. So Paradigm is his love letter to that genre, again, which he wasn't even alive for. Somehow, he's just done such an amazing job with it. And made this game, Paradigm, entirely by himself. He hired one composer / sound designer as a contractor, but even Jacob took on, aside from, never mind that he's a tremendous artist, and I do mean tremendous, not just in technical ability, but if you play or look at Paradigm, his ideas are extremely concrete and solid, well thought out. Every single character has a story, like an entire story and background behind it. Nothing is like a thoughtless, pointless prop. Extremely advanced artistic tenets of building, of world building. No one taught him how to do this. He just paid attention and did it. He even took on, and then on top of that, programming responsibilities. He even edited VO and implemented it in the game and stuff. Like, that is a lot for anybody, never mind a first time game developer. And if you look at Paradigm, the level of polish on it, when again, he's also a QA department of one, is nuts. He did it right. He lived with his parents. He saved his money. He had a very tiny, insignificant Kickstarter, and worked on it diligently for 3 years. The way I got in contact with him is everything he does goes viral. For fun, he'll make animated GIF pixel arts, and how I find him is he did one of Stranger Things, which is a Netflix series, and he did this gorgeous piece of Stranger Things GIF fan art that went viral. And based on that article that I found that from, I looked at him and I was just like, this kid's going places. So I just followed him on Twitter. And I mean, anybody in game audio, they're automatically family. I follow them back. Game developers, follow them. So I just followed him. I did not notice that he followed me back. Months later, many months later, I get a message from him. He's like, hey, I'm really sorry to bother you. I'm getting ready to record VO for my game. Would you be interested in auditioning? I didn't even know he was making a game. And I looked it up and was just completely blown away. And I was like, absolutely yes. And I try to remain accessible to lower budget projects, but within reason. Like, I personally charge union minimum wage. I'm a what's known as a financial core actor, which means I'm non-union. I'm not a member of the union, but I'm allowed to do union projects. They still take the union due cut out of every union job I do. And then in exchange, I'm allowed to do non-union work with impunity. If you're a union actor, if you're a member of the union with union benefits, but you do non-union work under the table and get caught, you get in trouble, you can get expulsed and fined and all this stuff. So I do it out in the open. So I charge union minimum wage to do any projects, just because if I'm giving my time away from a union project to a non-union project, I just have to make it financially worth my while. And both Young Horses was a union game because they wanted Tom for the lead as Octodad, Tom Taylorson, who was Scott Ryder in Mass Effect. And Jacob rallied and put on his big boy pants and paid me appropriately. So we went from there. And I got to do, like three animated characters, one off-screen voice, and 2 radio ads. And I'm so proud of it. The writing is so clever. And he did all the writing, of course, obviously. The writing is so clever and so genius. All the characters from like the Talking Sloth with the Donald Trump hairdo and stuff all have very detailed, well thought out backgrounds and purpose. I'm playing the game myself, and it's so enchanting. I'm super, super proud of him. Again, if you look at, even if you don't get around to playing Paradigm, which everybody should, just look at some of his fan art, because it's nuts. He did the Stranger Things gift that I mentioned. He did several mock-ups of a Seinfeld point-and-click adventure game. Obviously, he will never get these licenses to do it legitimately, but he does it for fun in his spare time. So he did a bunch of different animated gifs of like Seinfeld point-and-click. He's done some for like a Wayne's World point-and-click. And he's only like 24, 25 years old. So hopefully he'll be around for a really long time.
So, I have some listener questions from almost random parts of your resume. So
it's all random. It's all random.
Well, this one says, on your resume, it says you have a special thanks in StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, and going through the credits, you indeed have a thanks in StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty. What was the thanks for?
For being my ex-husband's first wife. I was married for 10 years to Phil Gonzalez, and he's a Blizzard lifer. We met the year before he got his job. They hired him on Valentine's Day, and he started on StarCraft 2 and shipped that, and now he is a 3D modeler lead on Heroes of the Storm and thriving and doing really well. And now I'm on my second husband, who is a sound designer previously from Rockstar Games in Edinburgh and Rocksteady, and Traveler Sales before that. Basically, the games industry is super, super tiny, and incredibly incestuous. Everybody's worked with everybody else or knows everybody by one degree. I've been working in games since I was 18 in 2001. So if I don't know someone directly, I know them by half a degree. So yeah, my special thanks is from my ex-husband.
Okay. So the next one is, you have credits for working on EverQuest 1, which looks like, as you said, you started in 2001, and that seems to be your first one there. And then you also got to work as voice integration specialist on EverQuest 2. Can you tell us a little bit about your work in the EverQuest series and, how that, I'm assuming, propelled you further into your gaming career?
Yeah, EverQuest 2 is how I got my foot in the door with audio. So back in the day, before there were so many colleges and vocational schools and programs where you can pay to get a game development degree of some kind, before that, there was nothing. And you just learned on the job, and traditionally people got in on the ground floor with entry-level jobs and were promoted internally. So, and usually that path was coming in with tech support or quality assurance or customer service. And I went in at 18, I got a job with Sony Online as a game master, which is customer service for EverQuest 1. And I did that for 2.5 years. And then I got to be Tech of VP's assistant for a year. And I didn't really know where I was going to fit into game development, because I knew I needed to be in that arena, but I'm not an artist. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a designer. And I'd wanted to be a recording engineer, but I didn't know about vocational schools at the time, because again, this is like early days of the internet. And every 4-year program I saw wanted like advanced credits of math and chemistry to get a recording engineer degree. And I was like, cool, that's not going to be my future. So in my 3rd year of being at Sony, for the first time ever, they opened up an internal audio department. Before that, all of their audio for all their games had been contract thrown over the wall. But they opened up one internally, because at that time, EverQuest 2 was going to be the most ambitious project in all of games ever, because they wanted to push 100,000 lines, which is still impressive, but like less than a lot of major open world sandboxy games like a GTA, for example. But at the time was a really big deal. And also they were implementing by hand, like line by line. There was no batch implementation or anything like that, and they couldn't keep up with the workflow, so they opened up an entry-level position for someone to just implement VO, and I applied and got it. And from there, after EQ2 shipped, one of the leads was kind enough to take me on and be my mentor and let me become a sound designer, and then I spent the next 9 years as a sound designer. And because of most most people in game audio per studio of like maybe 50 people, there might be, if you're lucky, one internal audio person. Nowadays, more likely contract because of the economy. But yeah, I'd say per 50 people, maybe one sound person. That sound person is usually asked to wear a lot of hats. Some people are expected to be like the composer and the sound designer and the VO producer and the person who exports scripts and the person who goes to recording studios and the person who does all the budgeting and the person who gets the contract signed and all that stuff. So I got to be, because I worked in bigger teams, I got to be privy to some of that. So once I became a sound designer, I got to spend a couple weeks in LA co-supervising VO sessions. And like, you know, a lot of those people are my peers now. They remember me from, oh my God, like 12, 13 years ago or something, being a little, you know, 23, 24-year-old baby, being the client. I used to be the client, and now I'm subject to harassment. So yeah, so that's how I got my start in there. But as a result, I've been fortunate enough that I've gotten this, you know, this full 360-degree view of how the sausage is made in the sausage factory, because I've been at all stages of the assembly line.
And now you can say you've officially contributed to what we lovingly refer to as Evercrack.
Evercrack. Yeah, I mean, well, obviously, like, I was a hardcore player before I got the offer. The job I'd been playing for, I want to say, like, nearly a year. And then they had their very first fanfare event in Las Vegas, which is where I was born and raised. And I got there. Long story short with that one is that they did not think about having enough capacity for the first night's events, and I made people gather at the bar, the game bar across the street, and made it my prerogative to get people and staff over there after the first event that only a limited amount of people were able to get in. And they tracked me down. They're like, "Do you want a job?" Which seems like really flattering, but also like, I mean, the job I was offered was game master customer service, $11 an hour, $21,000 a year. I don't know how I lived on that. I mean, I went in the red a lot just paying for gas as a little 18-year-old in San Diego, first time living on my own. It's when I moved away from home, everything. Like, I became an adult all at once somehow.
So this next one is you got to do the announcer or / information voice for Street Fighter V, a franchise which is long running, and you did a very good job. What can you tell us about your fandom of Street Fighter before you joined in, if at all, and what you feel you brought to the game that others before hadn't?
Well, I mean, I'm a child of the 80s, so, you know, I have really vivid memories of, like, pizza parlor arcades, you know, like, between Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat and, like, that whole era of arcade machines. That's my childhood in a nutshell, and, like, never enough quarters. So it's really cool, obviously, to get my name on there with a bunch of peers. The information voice, again, not a glorified position, but oh my God, that was like 24 hours of recording. And it's because it's not... They really want to make sure that you understand who you're playing as and how many times you played. Is it Ryu? I always say it wrong. Ryu, yeah, this is your 28th game as Ryu. This is your 30th win as Ryu. Oh my God. So I literally had to go through numbers up to like 1,000, or, I mean, they even had lines in there for like, for the 2017 EVO competition, and then stitch it together programmatically back home. That was hard. Those were long, long days. They bought me lunch. Because traditionally, you know, VO sessions only go for 4 hours, but I think we did 6-hour days, which any voice actor will tell you is really, really rough without a break. Maybe even 8, maybe we might have done 8 hours with like the 1 hour lunch in between. I just remember it was like a good 24 hours of recording just to get that done, which is significant for any game. I mean, it ain't no Mass Effect. I mean, I'll tell you right now, after coming out the other end of Mass Effect, anybody who's ever worked for a BioWare just like gets automatic combat veteran respect for me of like, I've seen what you've seen. I feel you.
Especially those that keep coming back for more and more BioWare abuse. Every BioWare game they're in, you know, there's some people who are in everything. It's not.
I mean, they're definitely not abusive.
Yeah, that's the joke.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're a joke. They're the most, but like, in case people take it literally, for the record, BioWare is exemplary for the industry. They have it down to a science. They are the most accommodating, so the thing actors hate the most is yelling and screaming, because it wrecks us for the day. We have to be really, really careful and paced about it. And they did this really smart thing where projected lines, emotes, being on fire, all that stuff would be peppered over the course of the many hours that we did, so it wouldn't all be done in one day. So like per session, be like, okay, and now we're gonna do five lines of yelling. Cool. and that's it, and done, and just shut up, no more. A lot of the time they wouldn't even ask me to do those lines twice.
Nice.
Which again also adds that pressure of like, you know what I mean, where I'm like, we're not going to get 50 takes of these because one, my voice is going to run out, and two, we don't have time anyway. So that whole idea of like, all right, bring it the first time. And also because they also want to meet me in the middle and not make me work hard. So if they felt good enough with the first take, we would go with the first take for those projected lines. I mean, I've seen people be like, oh, this game sounds like it's a bunch of first takes. And they mean it as an insult of like nobody worked hard on a BioWare game, which is a laughable comment. But for the projected lines as well, like, for example, for me now, as like, I consider myself a working professional with some experience. If I get auditions where they have the audacity to ask me for multiple yelled lines, and I'm talking about like, we want to hear 3 pain sounds, 3 death sounds, I delete them, because you're essentially asking me to work for free and blow up my voice for free. I can't do that. I have to save my voice for paying clients.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned how people, we know when Andromeda was released, some people just took it way too personally. And personally, I love the game. I rank it number 2 in the franchise, which is saying an awful lot because I put an awful lot of hours.
Yeah, that is complimentary.
And I don't know, like, people who complain that it's a broken game or these things are first lines or whatever, they haven't played bad games. Honestly, they have not played games that have bad dialogue. I've seen some of them. I own some of them, regretfully. And that is not one of them. And it's I don't know. It hurts me when people actually bad talk a game that I loved so much, because it's not, they're not even giving it a chance, which they really should, because it pays off in spades by the end in a way that, honestly, for me, no Mass Effect game has paid off in this level of realistic emotion for me by the time I'm done.
That's great to hear. No one is pretending that Andromeda shipped 100%. Like nobody is living in that denial of reality that it doesn't have some obvious issues. Sure, but the bar and the expectation for AAA is so unrealistically high. I mean, I made the mistake of trying to explain this on Twitter, which has resulted in me never trying to explain anything on Twitter ever again. Where I just, like, as an example, I mentioned, okay, so like I looked up an Uncharted 4, for example, which shipped recently from Naughty Dog, which is Naughty Dog gives an actor such a gift where you have voice actors in wetsuits performing at a volume. They basically get to perform theater with other actors, so they can have these very real scenes, performance captured and voice captured all at once. But it's all finite. There are no variables. You're not going to swap out which protagonist is playing, which NPCs are in the scene. None of those programmatical variables are there. So they can set it and forget it, first of all. So they can get a very tight, programmatically clean version of cutscenes and cinematics. No variables whatsoever. Uncharted 4, as far as I can tell, I looked through, playthroughs on YouTube, 4 hours of cutscenes, cinematic cutscenes. One person's playthrough with Sarah Ryder with one set of choices through Andromeda was 12 hours.
Oh, yes.
And multiply that times 2 protagonists times, which NPCs are in your squad, or like
how complete
which the variables are just astronomical. The more variables you introduce in a game scenario, the more problems you're inviting, because it's more to cover. And it's, unfortunately, people who have never worked on a game think everything's on it. Like, they're just all circuit breakers, right? You just open the circuit breaker and flip a switch and the whole thing's fixed. It's not like that. So, whereas like something like both games are AAA because of the budget and the size of the studios and the size of the teams that are involved and stuff like that. But Naughty Dog games are almost like films. The majority of their programming focus is on stuff like game mechanics and audio, things that you can't see with your eyes, but things that make the thing go. And then they have the bandwidth and animation personnel to really clean up those one-time scenes that will have no variables. There's just nothing like that for a BioWare game, because BioWare wants you, they so desperately want you to have all the options available to you that they'll do whatever it takes to deliver an incomprehensible number of choose your own adventures in one game. It's really mind-boggling to me, and I just find it very brave to even do that, because I think most game studios would rather ship a sure thing, even if it's a lot smaller. And we're in an era where, I mean, unfortunately, because of the internet, we have to hear everyone's opinions, right? Even if they don't know what they're talking about. And I've seen, I will squat on Twitch streams the first couple days that a game I'm in launches, just because I like to see people's reactions to my view or the game in general. I've seen people, like for The Park, for instance, which is a horror game, I've heard people quantify, this didn't have enough jump scares for the price. For this much money, I expect more jump scares. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't realize we were quantifying price tag based on jump scares. Or people think, a certain number of hours played means a certain price point, or a certain amount of VO means a certain price point, or a certain number of cutscenes means a certain price point. And you just can't quantify art that way.
Or, I had people that told me that Andromeda looks like a PS2 game. I'm like, that game would melt your PS2. You'd put it in there, your PS2 would turn into goop. It would die.
Imagine if we tried doing this price point what is worth thing with film. Like, well, that movie is clearly worth a $15 ticket, but that movie has like 2 characters and like 3 locations. That's like a $5 movie.
Or if they did it with old Nintendo games, a lot of those games, 10 hours max for most of them?
Yeah.
And I think it was like Final Fantasy was 10 hours or, something like that. I don't know. Sometimes gamers have unrealistic expectations, but
it's very difficult to explain reason to people who want mileage to equal overhead price.
Or want every game to be 300 hours in Skyrim. But I would say this: I love the game from beginning to end. Actually, it's the first game I've ever beaten before my gamer friends.
Wow!
And that's saying a lot because some of them play a lot of games, and I absolutely loved it. Though I have to admit, my first playthrough, I was a male.
That's fine. I only play female characters. I only play male characters when there's no other option because of that whole I like to see myself as much as I can in a character.
But I will be playing through again on New Game Plus the other way, though. I have to wait till I'm out of school for the summer.
Yes, get your grades. That's really amazing that you're
coming, and I'll do it. But I loved it, and I loved all the extra material I've gotten. I have a book. I know there's more books coming. I know this is a BioWare game. There's going to be DLC coming. We know this. I am looking forward to every minute of it, and I'm just going to say this. I applaud every one of you guys. Did such an excellent job with this. I had no issue with voices, animation, sure, but that's getting stuck in a wall, sure. But that's a different thing. Or people floating magically in the middle of a cinematic. That's a different deal. But it didn't hurt the game for me. It was great. It was a great story, great mystery, and it hooked me in a way that I want to know more. And you can't get much better than that for an entry that, like you said, like The Force Awakens, started a new era of Mass Effect, especially continuing off an era that really couldn't really be continued off of in a very easy way. And they found a way, and it worked so well. I just applaud you guys. You guys did so good, such a great job.
Thank you so much. I'm sure BioWare and all those teams would love to hear that when this comes out. And
I think I'm just going to ask one last question. I hear my kids crying, so something must happen. Last question I'm just going to ask is, I'm going to give you a soapbox to talk to the fans. If you have any appearances coming up, anything you want to tell them, any you can promote more Andromeda, anything that you can actually talk about that's not NDA'd, that you want to promote, or Comic Cons, coming up, stuff like that. So, or E3 even. If anything, it's yours.
Let's see. I have a couple conventions, but they're still in the negotiation phase. People have been asking me if I'm coming to their town. The way conventions work, as far as I can tell, you have to tell them, I want to see Fryda Wolf. And Twitter seems to be pretty effective for that. And if you tell them, if they have a manager that's paying attention, they will get in touch with me and we can start that process. I can't invite myself. It's not like I can just show up at your convention in your town, tell someone, scoot over, and just take over their table and start signing. We're guests because we're invited. So if I would love to come to your town, but please tell your local favorite convention to consider me, because that's how that works. I'm finding out. Stuff that's coming out that's been announced. Please play Paradigm. Please buy it. It is made by a child who deserves your money. I can't promise you enough. It is so, it'll blow your mind how polished of a game a 25-year-old can make. I got to announce myself. Bethesda was kind and I checked in with them and they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. Tell people. In Quake Champions, which is coming from id, they let me play not one, but 2 characters. So I'm Nyx, who is the blue-haired, leather butt clad, stealthy stealth, low sexy voice character. And I'm also Slash, who's like a rollerblading, Lori Petty kind of, what's up? You want to go? Pew! Whatever, that character. So you can have either of those. They're both fast and skinny, as far as I can tell. So that's coming up. E3 is coming up, and there's a couple games that I'm in that are going to have E3 push, and I'm not allowed to say anything yet. So check after E3. If you check my website, FrydaWolf.com, or my Twitter, which is also my name, Fryda Wolf, I'm sure I will be mentioning and pointing to those as soon as I can. So often, when people ask me what I'm working on, I'm like, I can't say what I'm working on. I can tell you what's already out. It's so boring.
That's the hardest.
So yeah, it is. It stinks. I mean, like, hey, I mentioned I'm in a couple animated shows for DreamWorks. That's nice. The shortest turnaround of any animated thing I've ever been on is a year and a half from the time we record. I have a few animated things, but because of when we recorded, you won't even see them until 2018. But as always, you can check my website or Twitter or IMDb, and when they're legal, when they're street legal, I will have them out there.
Fantastic.
But thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast, and I feel so very, very lucky that BioWare elected me for whatever reason to get to be a part of y'all's family. It really is like Star Wars, dude. Like it just becomes that kind of unspoken, interconnected world where you all exist with a secret handshake, and like I can't. My Twitter mentions, when they're good and positive, really feel like I'm peeking in on a fan club meeting of the highest order. It's so cute. It's so cute, and I'm so lucky to be a part of it.